SIP episode 131 this evening, and we answer the question, how does wine get its color? We do it with Lise Asimont, who's going to give us the answers because she's got 27 vintages under her belt and is one of the region's foremost viticulturists, and we do it while drinking her white Pinot Noir. SIP episode 131, how a wine gets its color. Tonight, we have one of our favorites, and I'm coming to you live from the set of The Shining, apparently. So please forgive us for the background. But if you've ever been to wine country during harvest and during press and seen juice come out of this machine, not only the aroma is spectacular, but the color, as you can see, is quite vivid and also quite lovely. And it's just something to behold. It's a very exciting time. It's very celebratory. So let's see who, Eric, I did not know Eric was amateur baseball fan, but your knowledge is second to none. That was a very impressive, I think, Twitter exchange I read. So let's get to where we are. My name is Martin Cody, co-founder of Cellar Angels. This is SIP episode 131, and tonight we're going to be talking about how wine gets its color. But before we do, I want to highlight and update everybody that, yes, we did just come off a very, very successful trip to wine country, filmed 6 wineries in a short amount of time, met with old friends, met with new friends, and the Cellar Angels streak is still intact. We have not been rained out of a winery shoot in 13 years. I happen to think it's because Angels is in our name. Now, this streak was jeopardized on Tuesday as we were driving to the shoot and it was drizzling, but it cleared up, and that was the Ramsgate Winery shoot, and you have to be looking out for that one because that property is ridiculously cool. Sandy O, good to see you. And Sandy O, you actually might be a winner because I don't see Doug. So this week's winner of the pop quiz is, what's the process when white wine is made from red or black grapes without extracting color? And the answer was A, pressing. Doug C actually had the correct answer, but Doug is not present. So we go to second, and that is Sandy. So Sandy, you will have another 100 loyalty points placed in your account. Keep your eyes peeled, folks, on the redemption catalog that's coming soon for those. And just in honor of the set behind me, I do want to show folks that might be too young to remember the movie of exactly where this was filmed. So don't let that, scare you or anything, but look how young Nicholson is there. That's incredible. I do want to show a couple of shots from the trip. This is a sipster, MJ, who is not unfortunately on this evening. And MJ joined us for the shoot at Passaggio, and Cindy Costco has a brand new tasting room in Glen Ellen alongside another Cellar Angels partner, Laurel Glen, and just up the road from another Cellar Angels partner, McLaren, with Steve Law. I apparently was nodding off during the photo shoot, so I apologize that James caught my good side there. And then also, we had a special invite from a winery that took 15 years to make. Now, 13 of those years were because neighbors did not want to have a winery. Knightsbridge asked us to come out and see their new facility. So we obliged, and here's some more sipsters, Sean and Marilyn. And Knightsbridge is in Knights Valley. It is literally directly across the street from Peter Michael. This is the only part of the winery that is not inside the mountain. So it took them about 4 years to build this, but like I said, 15 years to get approval from the neighbors, because the neighbors didn't want this area of Knights Valley turning into Calistoga or Healdsburg and have that population explosion. The trip was amazing. You're going to see some wines hitting the site very, very soon from those trips and from those shoots. But I will tell you one thing from a housekeeping standpoint. A consistent theme that we heard throughout the filming was, in fact, what is happening in wine country. And visitation, according to the wineries we spoke to, are down. Foot traffic is down. Part of this has to do with the pandemic, and now everything is by appointment only. Sometimes appointments are difficult to make. But the best thing we can all do to help support the small limited production winery is order wine. So in addition to the sip kit, which many people have this evening that they get on the Cellar Angels website, I do want to point out a few things on the Cellar Angels blog. Right now, we've got a new blog up on Pinot Noir, Sonoma's Petaluma Gap versus Burgundy. 7 dog-friendly wine tasting rooms in the Napa and Sonoma valleys, of which we have one this evening. We did talk to Ryan Hill of Hill Family Estate and did a new video there. We know Elkhorn Peak very well, but this blog should get a lot of your attention if you're traveling out to wine country, because it's tips for planning a California wine country trip. We break it down for you by quadrants, tell you where to go, how to get there, little tricks of the trade, things that most amateurs don't recognize the importance of. You're not going to be going over to Chalk Hill and then tasting something in downtown Sonoma and then going back over to the Petaluma Gap. That's like 5 hours of driving. So go ahead and hit this blog, tips for planning a California wine country trip. And for those of you that are new, you should go to the Cellar Angels website, help the limited production winery, and order wine. Here we have the sip kit, which many people are drinking tonight's wine that came from the sip kit. And then its great thing is you can like it. If you like it, you can go in and order more. So this is the best way, is repeat orders, order wines. And again, these wines aren't available in stores, so you're not going to go to your local wine purveyor and find these. They're mostly limited production, very rarely available outside of California. But from what we heard, this is the best thing that can happen to the wineries. Now, we all know, or think we know, how wine gets its color. But tonight we're going to go deep and geeky in how wine gets its color, and it's a lot more complicated than you would imagine. But tonight we also have a very, very special guest and dear friend of the program and Cellar Angels to explain it all to us, break it all down, and it gives me great thrill and pleasure to reintroduce to the Angels Lise Asimont from Dot Wines. Did I get that right?
You sure did. Thank you, and aloha.
Aloha. All right, so now aloha, I'm going to take a sip of your red wine, white wine concoction that we're going to talk about in a second.
He's pretty. I'm very excited about that.
So, Lise, we met you, I don't even know, 4 years or so ago. I'm not even certain how. I'm confident it was probably from a winery introducing us or a wine enthusiast introducing us. The way wine gets done when it's meaningful, authentic, and great wine. Referrals. So
I think it was April Knoll at Knoll Winery. So always want to give her credit because I love that woman. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Perfect. I'm glad I was speaking the truth, because April is fantastic.
She's amazing.
The Angels are big fans of Knoll. But walk us through, give us a little bit of your background and reacquaint everyone with your upbringing, how you got into wine, and how you decided to found Dot.
Sounds good. Well, I'm looking at my 27th vintage in the wine industry. And that actually started, 27 vintages, very exciting. That actually started in my upbringing at home. So I'm a proud Filipino American. My mom is from the Philippines, from a region called Cagayan in the northern tip of the Luzon island, which is the main island of the Philippines. And she came here to pursue her medical career. She met my dad. My dad is a third to fifth, depending on how you count it, generation American. And his family is from the Alsace region of France. So if you boil it down, I'm sort of a German, French, Filipino mix is what I am. And our family, I know, kind of hilarious. And our family, we were very fortunate to have family members that moved to Hawaii. They actually worked in agriculture there. And so I have very strong, what I refer to as Hawaiian roots. And being a person of mixed race, growing up in California, it was definitely challenging. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. However, every time my family went to Hawaii, there was this profound understanding of what I was, and they knew what I was, and I always felt so accepted. So I've always really identified more with my Hawaiian side of the family. So a lot of people think I'm Hawaiian Filipino, and I just basically come out and say, yeah, I'm Hawaiian Filipino, because it's a place where my family is mixed race as well. I'm a co-founder of the company. My husband, Sean Phillips, is of Welsh descent. So his tan, he has a good tan. He has a very good tan, but it is light. And then my son is a 6'3" blonde, blue-eyed boy named Cassius, who's finishing at UC Santa Cruz next week. So very excited for him. And our daughter is mixed race like me. So she's actually a quarter Filipino American. So yeah, that's sort of my background. I got into the wine industry because I didn't want to be a doctor like my parents, and they were thrilled, because that meant that they didn't have to support the baby through med school. So went to UC Davis, got my master's in viticulture. Back then, I'm so old that they didn't even have a viticulture master's at UC Davis. They had a environmental horticulture with a viticultural specialization. So that's my background. And I went right into farming. And that was 27 years ago.
So I want to go back and pull the thread on Hawaii for a second. You said
Mm.
you grew up in an agricultural background in Hawaii. What was the,
Oh, I didn't. I grew up in
oh,
California, but the family in Hawaii, they actually emigrated from the Philippines to Hawaii, to the island of Maui, to a specific area in Maui, West Maui, beneath the West Maui Mountains, to work in the pineapple fields. So they worked for Maui pine. So we have two generations of farmers on that side of the family. And now generation three, it's a bit sad. No one's farming. It's all obviously hospitality because that's the predominant industry, but they're very proud of me that I went into agriculture.
no, that's amazing. And it's interesting because we hear the word viticulturist and we don't give it a second thought, but I think folks need to recognize this is a very, very specific science and or degree. So walk us through kind of what a viticulturist does and why it's significant in the wine world.
Well, as viticulturists, we're trained to be specialists in grapevine farming and grapevine cultivation. And more specifically, my area of viticultural expertise is sort of threefold. I'm a classically trained grapevine physiologist. I studied underneath Dr. Andy Walker at UC Davis, and he's one of the last true ampelographers. And he also, for a while, was one of the last true grape breeders. Thank goodness Cornell University's taken over that helm. So woohoo, thank you so much for them. And then I'm a sustainability and regenerative specialist. So that's my second area of focus that I work in. And then the third focus that I work in is basically because I am a winemaking viticulturist, so I'm a winemaker who also grows wine grapes for a living, I have the ability to take wines and wine styles and backtrack that into vineyard cultural practices, and even backtrack that further into going into vineyards or even sites and figuring out, yeah, you want some kick in hillside, you want some kick in cab? Well, this hillside in Alexander Valley would work for that. Or you want some amazing Pinot Noir? Well, let's go to the Gold Ridge district of this area. I found this vineyard, it's this clone with this soil type, with this mesoclimate, with this much rainfall, and that would work. So that's sort of my other talent. So I'm kind of I'm a triple threat, if you know what I mean.
Triple threat.
Yeah.
With that knowledge, and it sounds almost encyclopedic, do you sometimes struggle with kind of typecasting something and getting blinders on, or opening yourself up to say, okay, now I know that Sandy Loam is going to do this. Well, hang on, let me just have a little bit of an open mind. Because I would think that with your background and consistency and redundancy of doing certain things, it almost becomes a foregone conclusion. Okay, good. I was going to say, how do you?
Never. We, as farmers, is it all right if I use the word ASS? So is that okay? It's all right. As farmers, we basically have our ass handed to us every vintage. I always tell people, if you want to be forever young, be a viticulturist. In lieu of climate change, and even before really climate change's signature put its death grip on my beloved industry, about 12 years ago was really the last climate patterns that I was really able to see. Sort of the first 15 years of my career, I was really able to see some sort of consistency in climatic patterns. And then after that, it all went to hell. It really has taught us that we really don't know very much about what we're doing with regards to climate change. And it kind of keeps us always young. So every year has its own climatic signature, and that changes how we experience physiologically the year. For instance, a lot of people say, well, climate change, you're probably getting warmer. Well, yeah, my husband's probably going to run from upstairs and hit me right now, but we're having a really challenging vintage right now so far because it's so cold and we're not getting enough degree day units. And so this pulls back to, 89. I wasn't working in 89, but I knew what happened in 89. It pulls back 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, and 2017. So I already have been running models, climatic models, to see which one I'm most mimicking. So it kind of helps me. That also helps to be old, but it's how we experience it.
Knowledgeable,
tenured, aged, tenured. And the other leveled up. The other thing that happens as well with climate change is that it shifts our seasonality of the year. So, we have the human calendar, right? Right now it's June 9th, and so we're heading into from late spring into early summer. But for vines right now, we're really only at bloom. So that's a different, so it shifted our season a bit late this year. So we're late. And so every year it's very different. The people who really fail in the wine industry are the ones who call it in, who have a recipe. The good ones who stay, and concerning viticulturists, I'm considered middle-aged. Concerning winemakers, I'm considered old, which is so hilarious.
But how are you considered old as a winemaker?
Not a lot of winemakers have been making wine for 27 years. A lot of times your whole career is like 25 years and you're out. You're like out. So yeah, it helps I started young. My first vintage, obviously I was much younger than I was now.
So I do like the fact that you have described to the notion that kind of each vintage is a unique, separate entity versus the folks that you mentioned mailing it in, or what we refer to at Cellar Angels, they make formulaic wine.
Yeah.
So it's going to taste the same every single year. Now, at 450,000 cases or something like that, you probably want formulaic wine, but I think most people, when they get into wine, that's okay. And I've purchased our share of, Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc because it's consistently right down the lane every single time. It's a
I love me some
wine.
Kimmy Crawford. I love it. I love it. I love that green bottle so much.
But it's a wonderful patio pounder from Costco at $17.99.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. All day.
However, when I want to really up my wine pedigree, I love the vintage variations and tastings of verticals and stuff like that. You're not going to get that with a KJ. You're not going to get that with a Kim Crawford. You're not going to get that at all. Anything, in my opinion, over 10,000 case production. Just not going to happen.
I'm going to tell you something really controversial. So you ready for this? It is so much easier for me to deal with vintage to vintage variability as the winemaker for DOT than it is as the vice president of viticulture for Foley Family Wines. What KJ what KJ and Kim Crawford are able to do vintage to vintage and take out that variability, that is wizardry. And it takes so many people like me work there, and I know both of those operational teams, and they're exceptional people. And it's so much harder to do that than it is for me. I get so much more license in a year. For instance, the 2022 DOT wine, Rowan Family Vineyard Pinot Noir white wine, has a little bit more color in 2022. Well, if I was working for a larger outfit, I would have been punished. I'd probably have to take charcoal and take out that color. But at DOT, hey, it's beautiful. So I get it. It's a little easier. There's pros and cons.
Well, and that gives us an opportunity to kind of pull on that thread with regards to, okay, so you're the co-founder of DOT, but you also just mentioned and referenced your day job, which is you went
gigantic.
Fast. So what is it again?
I'm the vice president of grower relations, which is a form of viticulture as a part of the viticulture department at Foley Family Wines. So I'm the person who's responsible for overseeing all 6,000 acres of our estate vineyards from Santa Barbara County all the way up north to Walla Walla, Washington. So I just basically covered California and the Pacific Northwest. And also I'm responsible for purchasing fruit that we don't grow for ourselves from outside growers. And I'm the liaison between winemakers and our vineyards. And so I'm sort of, again, that's that third credit I said I have, that ability. So that's how I sort of exercise it. I'm also on the acquisitions team. So you might have seen some of my handiwork last year. We picked up Chateau St. Jean and Silverado Vineyards. So
you're stealing all of my thunder. So I was just going to say, so for those of you that don't know Foley Family Wines, you probably know some of their asset in their portfolio. So if you want to, they own Coletto, they own Maris, they acquired Silverado last year. Silverado, by the way, still probably one of the top 5 patio views at 4:00 in the afternoon in the valley.
Oh, absolutely. It's breathtaking. It's breathtaking. Well, actually, my favorite view from a Foley Family Vineyard is Chalone, number 1. It does this to you. You like start feeling like you're the gravity of your mortality, and you get a little tear. Like that's that kind of place.
Is in Oregon.
Chalone is actually a very famous vineyard. It's one of the first vineyards planted in Monterey County, underneath the Pinnacle. Okay. Yeah, and it's above 2,500 foot elevation, right below the Pinnacles National Park.
And you also mentioned Chateau St. Jean, just a little household name, little mom and pop operation. Garagiste. Chalk Hill is also a Foley family portfolio, and Banshee. Yep. Those are just a few names that Lisa's kind of monitoring some of the grape production and everything about it in the viticulture for those brands. I mean, that's incredible.
It's awesome. I work with an amazing team. I tell people I've been there for almost a year, about a year and a half now, and I feel like I joined the Avengers, kind of like a smaller Avenger, like Ant-Man, but I still joined the Avengers, so it feels good.
And for those of you that are my age, you'll have to look up Avengers because it's not a household name in the Cody household.
I love Marvel. It's so great.
So DOT Wine, which is, I mean, you have the dream job at Foley. For the record, Foley's not a paid sponsor. I'm just going to continue to give them props. Oh, and if you are a Stanley Cup fan, there's also they own the Las Vegas Knights. So
Go Knights, go! Go Knights,
go Knights, go!
Yeah. Yeah.
Quite a great business family, and really, I like the story because they're now transitioning, as many multi-generational businesses are in the wine business, of transition into the children. So talk a little bit about what that's been like to experience, the original in the last year kind of some of the transformations you're seeing that really excite you.
Yeah, what I love about Foley is that I'm not the only decision-making woman in the room. And that was a huge thing for me. At Dot Wine, I'm not either, by the way. So, it's my husband and Sean and I founded the company, but we surround ourselves with women, people of color, and LGBTQ. That is what I refer to as our community enhancement hiring at Dot Wine. And Foley does the same thing. It's so magnificent. One of my first meetings there, I walked in and we were tasting through rounds of 10 of Cups, which is a new Banshee sparkling product that we created we launched it about 2 years ago, but I was tasting final blends for the new vintage about a year and a half ago. And I walk in and I'm 75% women in the room. It was amazing. And one of those women is Courtney Foley. She's what I refer to as my boss's boss's boss. And so she's Bill Foley's daughter, and she's taken the helm of Foley Family Wines. And she's just an incredibly compassionate and amazing person. And it's just an honor to work for her and her family. I know that sometimes Foley can get a bad rep, and it's interesting whenever anyone says, "Oh, I can't believe you work for Foley." And I'm like, I'm a vice president of viticulture and I'm a woman of color. Like, try to just let's roll through that for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
do you want to throw any more shade on something you don't know anything about?
Yeah, I can probably knock off a couple extra boxes if you need me to. Let's do that. So yeah.
And so now you have a great comparison and contrast position, because obviously what they're doing is numbers and numbers and numbers, and what you're doing exactly. So I understand why you think it's, a wonderful playground, but compare and contrast type of thing with, so what are you trying to do at Dot, and how did Dot come about, and how will you know if and when you're successful?
Oh gosh. Okay. So Sean and I launched Dot in 2016. At that point in time, I was working at the Francis Ford Coppola Winery, in a lower position, but similar vein of what I do here. And
Heard of them?
Yeah, heard of them. Well, the small Italian family owns them now.
You and the garage winemakers.
Yeah. Geez. This is something sort of to take home as well. There's a lot of people like me who work for these larger companies. And if we're lucky enough to have a compassionate executive team who allows us to have our own programs, it only makes me a better viticulturist, because now, I'm much more powerful as a viticulturist if I'm able to make the wines and understand what's going on. So in 2016, we launched Dot Wine with the Lolita Vineyard, which you've had. And that was a vineyard that basically was hands down, the perfect vineyard we ever wanted to start a program with. And I love that. I will love that vineyard till the day I die. And a couple years, every year we sort of layered in new programs. And about 2 years ago now, I was recruited to go to the Foley Family Wines team. And they were excited to take me on as a viticulturist, but there is a no winemakers are allowed to have their own wine programs rule there. And technically, I'm not a winemaker. Thank God. I was a package deal. I said, you guys can have me, and you can have the craziness that I can do, but Dot has to come with me. So it was very scary, actually. My boss took my wines and presented them to Bill Foley, and he said I could come on board and keep my label. So I don't know if that means he thought Dot was good or bad. I'm still trying to figure that out, but oh well. A lot of what I do for Dot Wine is what I get to do at Foley at the top end. So the very, very top end, like the Marises and the
Right.
vineyard designates of Banshee, and the vineyard designates CSJ and Lancaster and all those guys. And that is work with exceptional vineyards, with exceptional growers, spend an obnoxious amount of time in the vineyard with them, and do everything right. And that's the reason why I started Dot, was just I did not want to have to cut any corners, because when you're big, sometimes you got to cut those corners, and it kind of, it's like a part of your ego is not fed. I realize that we're talking ego here, but it was just this fun thing to have this like perfectly handmade product. And also on top of that, to be able to have our level of representation and tell our story through our wines.
I have like a 9-part question here.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna write it down. Okay, I'm ready. Let's go.
So all the growers that you work with, how many of them are new to you?
0.
Okay, and because of Coppola and the stuff that you've
Yeah.
traveled,
Oh,
there's probably not many vineyards that you haven't been
yeah.
in the state of California. So
There,
you know
there,
the growers. So
yeah, there was
then,
one vineyard that was new to me, but I knew their management team and I knew the area, and I literally picked up. I mean, that's Roan Family Vineyard, which you're having tonight. It's located in what I refer to as the Beverly Hills of the Russian River Valley. It's located in the heart of the cold heart of it, the Green Valley district. And it's so bougie. It's a slightly higher elevation from the best vineyard, Marty's, that I'd ever. It's called Marty's Vineyard, by the way. I thought you'd like that. That I worked with just down the hill from that. So I mean, it was a new vineyard to me, but I knew it's farmed by the Duttons, and I've worked with the Duttons for 20 years. So
okay, so I'll pick up on that in a second, but the Roan Vineyard, and for the Wisconsin people in the group,
oh
Mike
yeah,
Roan, yeah, huge. Mike
yeah,
Roan was a
yeah,
UW grad, played
yeah,
football, graduated in 73, played 6 years in the pros.
yeah.
And
Tennessee Titan. He's a Tennessee Titan.
yep.
Yeah,
And so now
yeah.
has a little spot in Sebastopol that we'll see. Jeff, restrain yourself, that we're going to see on Google Earth a little bit later on. So getting back to the question at hand, the growers, and my fantasy is you walk in and you meet this grower and this vineyard site, and what happens when the grower is going in one direction and the vineyard site as good or better, and how do you come and say, you know what? I mean, do you tell them what you want them to do
Mm-hmm,
as far as spacing, pruning, everything,
mm-hmm,
caning, all of that? And
mm-hmm.
how do you mesh with their goals, philosophies, aspirations? Because it's got to be unique with every single one.
It's contracts negotiation. It's also the fact that I have a seemingly pleasant personality. I'm a direct communicator, and I'm old and respected. That helps a lot. Also, a lot of times too, it's a lot of times when I'm walking with a grower who's basically you give them like the 100% of what you want, and you have to understand in the industry, like a year like this, it's really cold. Like I'm not going to nail my canopy right off. We're going to have to do a couple times. I'm a farmer too. And there's the commonality that I create. There's usually a pre-existing relationship that I have with most growers, or they've heard of me, or their neighbor knows me. And usually that's good. Thank God, right? Knock on wood. And so I'm able to sort of focus and work with them. A lot of it too is the fact that I'm a woman. I communicate in a very different way. I can be very disarming because I don't look like the other people. I'm not an older white man, sorry. And so it's
Right.
very disarming for people. Sometimes I remind you of your granddaughter or your niece or your daughter, or with that sort of thing. And the other thing too is I farm myself. I know how much it costs to do everything I'm asking you. I can tell if we were sprayed properly overnight or if we got cheated. I can tell these kind of things because I'm literally that old and I've seen it. So I'm reasonable. And the other thing too, we're in this together. So there's a lot of ways that I work with my growers, both on my day job and for DOT, where we align ourselves together. And that's always in the final bottled product. So the Roan family, Amber and Mike Roan, are so incredibly proud of this bottle. They're so incredibly proud to be this grower because we've engaged them in that process. And there's
Well,
a lot of ways to do it.
let's talk about that bottle, because
Sure.
it's not many people have had a white Pinot Noir. And it is something interesting that Mission Control, a year or so ago, we were blind tasted on this wine in your tasting room when you were trolleying about with the scooter and had torn an Achilles or something like that.
Yeah.
And you were kind enough to say, I've got a little surprise for you. Why don't you guys all taste this? And so that was a lot of fun. But the subject matter is, how does wine get its color? So let's spend a few minutes on that. But first, tell us a little bit about a white wine from red grapes. How does that happen?
Well, so when we talk about how wine gets its color, you have to keep in mind that I'm the sciencey, researchy type, right? I came from Davis, and I sort of have friends that are very involved in phenolics and color expression and anthocyanin studies. And so I've had this background, this very robust research background, and how wine gets its color, how to retain the color, and then the practical side of it, what operational practices, winemaking practices do we need to do to ensure that? So then I took that and I went and I threw it upside down. The reason why we started this program, however, was out of necessity. So in 2020, as you may remember, there was fire in the disco and the doors were locked. So it was a lot of panic. We had a tremendous amount of fires, and we lost the Roan family vineyard in the Green Valley district of Russian River Valley to smoke exposure. And at that time, the grower, Mike and Amber Roan, they were so small. It's a 3.5 acre vineyard. They didn't have insurance. It just killed us. And what people don't know is the reason why we know this family is because my husband used to serve on a local high school board. It was my son's high school board. And Mike Rohn is the athletic director there. So we're talking small town, tight community. These are our neighbors, our Ohana, right? Like, then this was really, really horrible. And turning down the Rohn family vineyard in 2020 kept us up at night. I mean, it was emotional. We hated it. And so we vowed to them, we're going to figure out ways to do it. So there's two things I can do if we have a smoke exposure event. One is I can yank it and make a thin rosé, or I can yank it and I can make a thin white, right? Out of a red grape. I know how to do that because, as you know, we have a sparkling program. And so I knew I could do that. But the question was, we already have a Sauvignon Blanc that's tank fermented. And we already have a rosé that's tank fermented that is beautiful. But we don't have that epic fat beastie white. Okay. So it's like, okay, let's make a fat beastie white. But to add a layer of like, kind of like, let's do some like a complexity to this whole like quest for the golden fleece. I'm also married to, and the co-founder of my company is a man who has zero tolerance for butter or oak. So I have to make a big fatty white, but no butter or oak. And if I did, homeboy's gonna leave my ass. And I want to stay married. He's hot. Have you guys seen him? He's beautiful. And he's also like my soulmate. So it's like, okay, how do I do that? And so it took a couple years to figure this out. And I said, babe, I can do it. I can do it. So in 2021, we reserved a section of the vineyard. There's one block that I call the upper block. And Dutton, of course, has like Southeast 23, like all these crazy numbers. I'm like, you guys, it's the upper block that's shady. It loses, it's alongside a tall tree barrier, and it gets shady in the afternoon. And I'm like, I am never making a high-end Pinot out of this thing, guys, people. So it was like sort of like, you're going to make rosé out of this all the time. So we took it, we farmed it for white wine production, which is, I left a more generous canopy, but still with enough light and air infiltration to suffice my pest management needs. Because as y'all may know, the Russian River Valley is a really tough area with pest management and fungal disease practices and management. But then you go to Green Valley, which is even colder and even more wet. It's like, oh, you got to be on it. So we were able to do that. And then we picked it at the peak of acidity. I didn't want to pick it at the peak of flavor because I didn't want flavor. I wanted acidity because I knew that we were looking for something that was disassociated from color. And a lot of times, a lot of the flavor profiles, those volatile phenols that we love, are associated with color. And I said, look, I'm going to disassociate this. So pick it at the peak of acidity. We did, brought it into the winery, did a champagne press, which is about 110 gallons per ton. Normally, when I'm bougie, I'm super bougie with dot wine. So I'm pressing to like 150, 155 gallons per ton. And then for let's say rosé production, I'll go to 165. Like, I'm very careful because I'm obsessed with a lack of bitterness. I hate catechins and epicatechins. I will not allow bitterness.
Time out.
Oh God, I got the timeout. You said I get it if I get too technical. Shoot.
No.
Okay.
It's all good. But you talked about picking at acidity versus picking at ripeness, at the peak acidity. So now we've seen charts and graphs of how you kind of want to pick exactly when these tend to intersect. And so you didn't care if they intersected. You were going for peak acidity. And I want to say, why does that matter on color?
It helped me. It helped me because I knew that I would have less formed enzymes in the pulp by that time. So it was done on purpose. Also, the wine making practice that I had decided to do was going to test the acid profile of this, because I had to create a crisp wine, but it had to be fat and big. So it was like, I had to like do this. Like I had to do this, but also kind of like this at the same time. Like it's one of these. So champagne press goes directly into neutral oak barrels that I had reserved for this. I used 0 new oak. So I actually had to score older neutral oak barrels from a bunch of buddies in the industry, Burgundy barrels. We stirred the fermentation daily. Okay, stir daily, and that's creating depth and texture. And these barrels are located in a cave. I make all my wines at J. Rickards Winery. My mentor's Jim Rickards in the industry. It's located in Cloverdale, California, which is just north of our home base in Healdsburg.
Yep.
And we put them in the cave. So it was a nice cold fermentation to make sure that we were going through the fermentation slowly enough to preserve aromatics, not burn off any of those thiols or esters I'm trying to preserve. Stir daily, stir daily, stir daily. 2 yeasting regimes, like a brewer. I know, so badass, right? The first yeast was a Viognier yeast to accentuate aromatics. So when you hit this glass, you're picking up a lot of those high tone esters and pretty fat thiols that are kind of coming out of that glass, almost making you think it's a Viognier. So that was done on purpose. And then the second yeast was done for texture. So it's a big fatty yeast that would just kind of go chomp, 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 and create as much texture and richness as we could. Rack off the barrels. Go back into the barrels, and then I would
go ahead.
Oh yeah, rack off, go back into the same barrels after we rack off to a tank, take off the leaves, rack off to a tank, inoculate in tank with a very special bacterium that I had been working with for 2 years that goes through malolactic fermentation, 100%, which is why I need the peak of acidity, 100% malolactic fermentation, but it does not kick out any of the component or compound called acetobutyl, which is butter. And that was very important to me so I could stay married, right? And then go back onto the lees. I smelled lees, made sure lees are clean and we're really healthy. Go back onto lees. And then we went through 100% malolactic fermentation on lees. And then, this is the kicker, 10 to 14 extra days on lees in those barrels, stirring. And what that did was it made the color in that fermentation so unstable, it captured into the lees. So when we dumped our lees, the lees were like pink and brown.
I was going to say, so the lees had the color.
Yeah, because a lot of times for people to get this kind of color in their wines, they're using PVPP, polyvinyl. PVPP is it's a polyvinyl component that actually strips out color, or you're using charcoal, and that actually takes away aromatics, and it takes away mouthfeel, and it takes away flavor. And I needed to keep that because I was creating something that I never had tried before. I'd had a couple white Pinot Noirs before. Emeritus in Russian Valley makes one. Oh God, my daughter's godfather.
Anime in Oregon makes one.
Anime in Oregon makes one, and then oh God, Lycan makes one as well up in Anderson Valley. But their style, like Emeritus's style, is like really buttery and really creamy, and it's like it would put Rombauer, like give Rombauer a run for its money. And then Lycan is tank fermented; it's super angular and kind of fun and bright. So we had to kind of do something in between, and the end result to me was this sort of like love letter to Pinot Noir. It also reminded me of a Chablis. And like, let me tell you, I have never met a Chablis I have not loved. But I loved that aromatic brightness, acidity, but also that big, chunky, fatty richness to it. So, yeah.
I mean, this is, I love this wine for what you just described. It is big, it has texture, it has acidity. And to Sean, who is a brother from another mother, it doesn't have any oak or butter. So I'm a big fan of that. When we talk about red wine getting its color, I think everyone would say, oh yeah, it gets its color from the skins and sitting on the skins, but there's actually obviously much more to it than that. And so we talk about pressing, we talk about the enzymatic process, we talk about maceration, but we talk about that. I would like you to talk about it a little bit and say, here, how does red wine get its color?
You got it. So red wine gets its color. Now we're talking about normal wine grapes that are non-Teinturier. So Teinturier wine grapes are like Alicante Boucher, Tintacao.
What does that word mean?
Teinturier means tinted grapes.
Okay.
And so there are grapes in this world that when you bite into them, their pulp and their juice is red.
Right.
Okay, there are those. Okay, those are those guys. And a lot of times you'll encounter these in Portugal or in port blends or the wines of the Douro, or you'll encounter these as sort of like color boosters in old field blend, old head trained spur prune, like Zinfandel vineyards. Okay, so we're not talking about those. That's a different situation. They have a different function.
Red skins, white pulps.
Red skins, white pulps. Okay, and so when you have that, a lot of people don't realize, yes, the color is contained in the skin. And of course it is. But and everyone says, oh, well, have you ever tried to take out a grape skin and tried to mush it and try to make it the color bleed out of it? It won't. Unless you put it into your mouth, which is a trick I do every harvest that grosses everybody out who's not in the wine industry. But this is, so when I taste grapes during harvest, I'm going through and I'm staring at about a million things and I'm noting them and I'm putting them into I use monday.com to take all my notes, but I'm noting them into here. And then I'm looking at seed ripeness, I'm tasting seeds. I'm also, the whole time I'm doing this, I'm basically taking the skins. I have the ability, it's like, you know how people can do like cherry stems and they can tie them up. So viticulturists do this with grape skins. We put the grape in our mouth. We put the skin on one side of our mouth. I tend to lean to the right. And then we spit out the pulp. Okay. And the whole time I'm looking at seeds, I'm taking this and I take a seed and I put it in my left side to taste the bitterness. Ah, it's good. The whole time I'm macerating, chewing. I'm chewing those skins in my mouth. And what's happening is I take out that wad that I've created. By then I have about 2 to 3 berries worth of skin. And I milk it onto my hand. And my husband always thinks this is one of the most disgusting things I do, but I milk it onto the light side of my hand, because if I go on the top side of my hand, this side of my hand is brown, this side of my hand is white. So I put it on the white side of my hand and I milk it and I can see the color expression that I have. Okay, it was not the grape juice that got that color out. It was the enzymes in my saliva. They had to lyse, they had to break that cell wall and release that color. And when you do that, that color is temporary. If I walk around with this for a long time, it's actually going to fade eventually, because color, or an anthocyanin or anthocyanidin molecule, needs to bind to something else to be sturdy and persevere in a fermentation, in a liquid environment. If it's just on its own, it's going to fade out because it's inevitably going to be captured by something like lees, right? The lees, right. the guck, the yeast hulls and bodies and yuckiness and waste at the bottom of my barrel, right? Or it's going to bind to something else that's going to basically make it come out. And so that's why color, the pervasiveness of color, really depends on how many anthocyanidin molecules you have and what they bind to. An anthocyanin to an anthocyanin bond is pretty good. But an anthocyanin to a tannin bond is like nothing's going to break you apart.
Like a steel weld.
Yeah. Like ain't no mountain high enough. It's one of those, right? You cannot break this stuff. So that's how it goes. Now you can have anthocyanin to anthocyanin to anthocyanin tied by an tannin complex, and those do pretty well as well. But the whole point is, now, have you ever heard of like when the old timers were making Zin, they would always say, you need a little white to make the red darker. Do you remember that?
Yep.
They didn't know the function. I mean, these are the people who used to plant like roses at the end of grapevine rows too. I mean, it's kind of silly stuff. The reason why that's silly is because they thought it was an indicator plant, but it's a different species of powdery mildew that affects both. So it wouldn't be an indicator plant. Anyways, but so I digress. So this whole situation, it's interesting where they were actually giving their fermentations additional enzymes from the white grapes to go in and grab more color from the skins. So yeah, because there's a saturation point. You only have in like one grape berry, in a Pinot Noir grape berry, you only have so many enzymes in that pulp, right? Well, what if you had like what if you had a more, and so usually we're kind of well matched with Pinot Noir, but with Zin, which is actually kind of lighter colored, you actually have extra enzymes. You have enough enzymes, so they'll pull more out of the skin than you can actually take. I've actually, in my career, I've reused skins for this reason.
I was just going to ask, so then the particular grape skin has enzymatic capabilities. It varies by skin, or?
The pulp has the enzymes. The pulp.
Okay. The pulp has the
juice,
enzymes.
The juice, the pulp. Yeah.
Okay. And so when we talk of maceration and people talk about extended maceration and extraction and that sort of stuff, what are they really saying, and what are the components that they're playing with?
The greatest function, the greatest chemical function of an extended maceration is to continue to create bonds. Whether those are bonds between, that's a perfunctory releasing, usually releasing all of your color earlier on. However, if you're going to do an extended maceration on your skins, there's one Pinot Noir wine I did with this. It's called The Player. I made it in 2019. The whole function of that is to continue to pull out any other anthocyanin from the skin that we haven't gotten, with all those extra enzymes from the pulp kind of hanging out in that fermentation. And also a big function of that extended maceration is for the sustainability of those color bonds. So when you're doing that, you're also starting to allow for polymerization of these molecules. So again, anthocyanin is going to attach to anthocyanin, it's going to attach to a tannin. So you're creating more persuasive and longer lasting color. And that's what you want, right? And we're kind of a drink now world, but with Pinot Noir, we also want, Pinot Noir is not as much, to be honest, but with like, if I made a big fatty cab, you bet your bottom dollar I'm going to do an extended maceration, because I want to make sure that usually with cab, we have more tannin than we can deal with. So I want to make sure that those tannins are either polymerizing and basically fixing that color into that wine, okay? Or I want those tannins dropping out on me.
And what does, when you say extended maceration, give me, is extended, it's normally 3 hours and we're going to go take it to 10 hours. It's normally 3
No,
days.
it's
And then we're going
days.
to do, okay. So give me,
It's days.
is it like 3 to 5 days, and extended is more like 10 to 15?
I mean, I've worked for some high-end Napa houses besides, I had a life before Foley, and there were some crazy, crazy extended macerations. And at that point in time, it's not working. So there is a saturation point, and you have to
Right.
understand the varieties, the vineyards you're working with. You have to understand what you have in that fermentation. Some of the best Cabernet Sauvignon fermentations I've ever been a part of, we measured during the fermentation how much tannin we had, so we could understand when we were going to hit the saturation point and when we were
Right.
just being silly, right?
Certainly
Yeah,
the,
and
the
so
law of diminishing returns enters into the equation.
yeah, and there's other things as well that control how much color you're going to pull out as well. Temperature, warmer temps, you're going to pull out more color. Too warm, you're going to degrade color. Okay, so we're talking about like 58 to like 68 to like, we can go up to like maybe like 80 degrees, but really, I really feel like above 80, you're going to start degrading that process, right? You're going to start having your color now denature, its binds are going to denature, it's going to drop out on you. So it's like, okay, bummer, I didn't do that. Another thing that functions is pH. Lower pHs tend to be more preservative and are actually easier to extract color out of it. Too low of a pH, too acidic of an environment, though, you will start denaturing the ability for these bonds to create. Another one is alcohol. Nothing pulls out color like alcohol. But the problem with alcohol is nothing pulls out tannin like alcohol too. So if you're trying to manage your fermentation, especially as a Pinot Noir winemaker, let's say I'm working with a more tannic, and we're talking like on a scale of like, we're not like tannic scale, like we're talking small scale tannins as opposed to like cab, which is like massive tannins. But if I'm working with a clone, let's say like the Calera clone, which I love, or clone 37, the Villemount Eden clone, there is just a gazonga load of color. And because of that, you have to make sure that you're allowing for that tannin extraction to happen. Some people do it the wrong way and use really green tannins from rachises and an unripe rachis here. And those people need to go to Pinot Noir winemaker hell, in my opinion, because that's gross. But some people do it right, where they're going to allow for a little bit of seed tannin in a ripe year for that to be extracted. So there's ways to do it, but you got to know your site. It's all about, hey, walk your site.
Oh, it's a little bit more than walk your site. I do want to let people know what's behind Martin. Denise is behind me. She's my #1 supporter and fan. So that's what's behind me. Mission Control. What is this machine called behind me that's pressing the grapes into this bin or bins?
It's a press.
It's a press.
Yeah.
So that was one of the options as far as how wine gets its color. But we all know, or you should know, and if you haven't picked it up on this episode of SIP, shame on you. Lise is a Pinot Noir savant, passionate lover of Pinot Noir. And as a result of that, she has a tattoo of a Pinot Noir clone on her arm. So, it's it's 2 T's and 2 O's, not 1 T and 3 O's. But that's okay.
No, I fixed it.
No, we're emphasizing, what does she have tattooed on her arm? Is it Pomard? Is it Dijon? Is it 777? And some of you that are clone geeks may actually recognize it. But that gives you a level of dedication when you actually have a tattoo of your favorite clone, a tattooed on your arm. I'm going to give this 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2. You are adorable, because no one in this audience would get it from that.
Really? Oh my God. It's kind of obvious, y'all. Really? Seriously?
Too late. The voting booths are closed. So it's interesting. No one picked Dijon. And for those of you that did not pick Dijon, you are correct. It is not the Dijon clone. However, it is the 828 clone. And how would we know it's the 828 clone?
Okay, y'all, here you go. Let me close. Okay, this is, so the 828 is not, 828 to me is a sparkling clone. So, I mean, it's not my favorite, but the reason why you would know is because the cluster elongation is too long for my favorite, which is like 667, 777, or Calera. We love some Calera. That's some good stuff. And then I love Pomard as well, which you're drinking Pomard. The Rowan family vineyard is Pomard clone, which is just so masculine and just so expressive. And it's just like this really fun thing to work with. I'll talk about it in a second. But the cluster elongation is entirely too long for any of these other clones. Okay. It has entirely too many berries for this count, and it has a little bit juicier of a berry. And this was a last minute artistic decision that my tattoo artist, Bad Billy in Healdsburg, California made, because she wanted it to look like a grape cluster as opposed to something that looked less significant, which unfortunately the clones that I loved look a little less significant. So we went with her interpretation, but the leaves are ampelography correct. So they're physiologically correct, if you can see those.
There's another word, Jim, ampelography correct. So my guess is that means it's like the leaf it's supposed to be.
Yes, yes.
Woo. All right, I do want to show folks where you got this wine or this vineyard from. And I think it's especially fascinating that given your knowledge of the terrain, of the vineyard sources, of every single block up and down the entire state of California for the last 27 years, I would argue that there's no one that knows the vineyards better than you. I quite honestly can't imagine it. And also then what that does bring to the ability to source, the ability to, like you said, you have these relationships. And you do have this encyclopedic spice factory of knowledge in your head where you're like, I think I know what I want. And then you can go strike a relationship with that person in that vineyard to say, I need 2 tons of fruit because I need this little additive, or I want to make something from your vineyard, which to a credit to you, that's a testament that says you are authentic. You do take care of people. You are a person of your word. And so that is really heartfelt for the Cellar Angels, because we know what's going to be in the glass is going to be representative of all those years of struggle and great relationship building. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I am going to share Jeff. Is Jeff awake still? Google Earth. So wine region. This is the only place we play. Napa County, Sonoma County. And this, by the way, if Lise could actually just spend a day here, she's all over the state. She's all over the Pacific Northwest. It would be nice. I don't know your airline frequent flyer program, but I'm sure it's maxed out. It's an impressive playground. We actually just got done with 6 days here, and we were up and down Sonoma, didn't get it further north than Santa Rosa. We spent a little time in Forestville, did have an amazing Chardonnay and Pinot Noir at, you probably know Elaine Sale of Elaine Wines. That's a scary property from a standpoint of deliciousness, and boy, what great hosts. But so this is the 2 counties that Cellar Angels lives and thrives in to help the small producers gain a larger national audience. The Rowan family vineyard is interesting because you mentioned a tree line getting late shade.
There it is. That's the block. You're on it. That's the block. That's the block. That's the white block. Then go to your right. That is the lower. That's the lower block right there. And then go in front, we're Rowan family vineyard. That's the best block in that whole vineyard. That's what I call the house block. And that's where our reds, and then I supplemented with fruit from the lower block for the 2021 Rowan family vineyard Pinot Noir red wine.
And you can tell this person is a sports fanatic. He's got a sports court out here, pool, machine shed over here with, I'm sure, lots of toys, but that's what farmers have, right?
Yeah.
Also, I want to show a little bit about the influence here, because you're not that far from the ocean.
No.
Oopsie.
No.
I don't go that way. Stop.
Oh boy.
Who's seasick besides me? Hang on, I have to do that again. There we go. Let's try that again and take off the elevation model. So 10.5 miles as the crow flies.
Mm-hmm.
How much of an influence does that bring to the vineyards, given that proximity to the Pacific?
Tremendous. And then if you can you pan out? So you're looking at Green Valley right there as well. And the beauty of Green Valley is that you see can you trace the Russian River? Do you see up north where Jenner is, that mouth of the Russian River? Go up left, left, left. So there's the mouth
Oh, in
of the
here?
Russian River. There you go. Yeah. So you see how that goes right there. So
Yep.
that whole situation there, that acts as a conduit because these coastal hills are anywhere from 1,100 to 3,000 foot elevation, depending on what part of it you're in. For the Russian
Wow.
River Valley, the mouth of where Roan Family Vineyard is, which is located, that's the part of Green Valley District right there. That's actually it's a lower with a really big wide gap where the mouth of the Russian River comes through. And so the egress ability of those Pacific characters, that cold marine temperatures from the Pacific Ocean are really strong. And then where Roan Family Vineyard is, the Green Valley District itself is like a concave bowl. It's a watershed, the Green Valley watershed, and it's very, very significant with regards to how it can trap the fog. So it's nice and cool and it stays cool. So a lot of times when I'm up at Lolita, which is also Green Valley, but it's up on a ridge, kind of over the Green Valley, it's usually in sun before Roan gets to it. I will actually, for the red programs, I will pick those vineyards anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks apart.
Oh, geez. And Green
Yeah.
Valley also home to Iron Horse, another sparkling
love.
producer and Pinot Noir and Cellar Angels partner. So it is very, very chilly there. So you do get that Pacific influence in a huge amount. Tell me a little bit about, let's go flavors, aromas, flavors, and pairings.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people, we love giving this to people and saying, guess what it is. And people, I think what we've gotten the closest is it has like a Viognier-like white flower. It's not a Viognier flower, let's say, but it's definitely like, because for me, Viognier tends to have that more like jasmine, honeysuckle kind of character. For this is more of like almost like a citrus blossom kind of white flower. So it's a very different kind of white flower. And I love that about this aromatically. And then flavor profile for me, it's this sort of citrus and fresh pear combination with just a richness to it, which I absolutely love. So I have a little bit of lychee. So
absolutely. And I
yeah.
love the citrus and fresh pear. That's a perfect description because pear, most people, that's a rich, luscious fruit.
Yeah.
Especially ripe pear, but the citrus, and there's a kiss of citrus acid in there, and the lychee is a great call.
So my favorite pairing with this is by far Poisson Cru. I love me some Poisson Cru. So Poisson Cru is the poke of Tahiti. So you take fish that is very fresh. You can use tuna. I really prefer hamachi for this because hamachi has a little bit of richness to it. If you can get your hands on some amberjack or butterfish, like all day, right? If it's super fresh, cube it up, throw it in, and then I like a little bit of like a small diced carrot, maybe small diced cucumber sometimes, and then definitely serrano chilies because me like it hot. And then a little bit of cilantro, but don't be afraid to use the stems for texture, which I really appreciate, and for flavor hit. That like sort of it's a wonderful way to kind of get that hit into it. And then coconut milk and tons of lime. And then I use a little bit of red Hawaiian sea salt, ala sea salt. And so it's beautiful. And then you mix it up. And I sometimes eat it with hot rice. Sometimes I eat it with taro chips, but usually I'm just sitting there eating it, like, just let's go. But Poisson Cru for me is so beautiful.
That sounds amazing. I do want to let folks know, this should be one of the wines that you have around your house all summer long, because it's a white Pinot Noir. So as Lise said, you could give this to your guests all summer long and ask them, go, tell me what you think of this. Tell me what you think it is. And they will never know. And then obviously you will indoctrinate them into the specialness and uniqueness of the wines you get to acquire and help support. A white Pinot Noir from a viticulturist and ambassador of the industry like Lise is very unusual, and we are all better off as a result. And there's only 30 left in stock. So I would imagine hopefully that we can help get those moved. And I love the food pairing idea. Everything you mentioned is mouth-watering. So I definitely, I don't know how we missed eating at your place, but we have to remedy that. We have come to that time of the program where we actually have to let people enjoy the rest of their Friday. Oh, I have one more thing to do before I thank you. How does someone come taste with you?
Oh, you can check out our website and make a reservation with us. We also welcome drop-ins, so you can also just go see us at the Bacchus Landing Winery Collective. It's located in Healdsburg, right outside of downtown. It's a beautiful place. It's a transformative place. You enter into a beautiful olive tree-lined piazza. There's soft music being piped in. Friday, Saturday, Sundays, we have the wood-fired pizza oven going at the market. And there's 7 wineries, including Dot Wine, represented there. One of those wineries is called Westside Sparkling, which is another Dot Wine team project that we started with Aldina Vineyards, another smaller winery in there. So it's a kind of fun. You can get just about anything in there. It's really fun. There's grab and go. It's kid friendly. It's dog friendly. And we would just love to have people visit.
And just because Scotland missed Google Earth, we brought it back to show Bacchus Landing to give you guys some orientation. This is the town of Healdsburg. So here is when you come off 101, you come right in here, you go around this roundabout, you go up here, here's the Healdsburg Square, and Bacchus is right here. I mean, it literally is about a mile as the crow flies to downtown Healdsburg Square. So it is, if you're staying in Healdsburg, this is a place to come taste, because as Lise said, there's several different tasting stations or salons there, and they're amazing, and it is a ton of fun. And Montagne Russe is there, another Cellar Angels partner. But also there's a little bit of a dining scene in Healdsburg that you might want to take note of, because rumor has it they have more Michelin stars than Yountville at this point in time. So including one of our favorites, Barn Diva. But that is exactly where you need to be. Healdsburg, and Bacchus Landing is fantastic right here. You could spend probably 4 or 5 hours here and not even hit the 7 tasting rooms. So it's a delightful place to be. That is how you go taste with Lise and see Sean and applaud him for not liking oak and butter, because that is something that we should all applaud. If you missed any of the prior Cellar Angels SIP episodes, you can actually, Mission Control, put that link into the chat comments. So feel free to grab some of those. Next week, by the way, we are off. Now, I know it seems like we take a lot of time off, but we are going to be at a charity event in Chicago. And you all know, Sipsters, that you help raise money for some incredible causes. This is for Erie Family Health, which brings healthcare to underserved areas in and around impoverished parts of Chicago. And they do amazing work. We're going to be doing some wine auctions there, a invisible wine grab or wine pull, which should be a lot of fun, but we're going to be flying in town. And then the following Friday, the 23rd, we have Meet the Winemakers. So wine club members, we will see you on that day. And then stay tuned, because June 30th, we have the Science of Sensory Evaluation with Professor Hildegard
Heyman.
Yes.
Heyman. I love her.
Yes, from UC Davis. So exactly right. She is going to be joining us. So that will be the next time all the Sipsters gather together. Wine Club members, we will see you in 2 weeks. We are going to be there in Chicago next week, helping raise money. Remember, everyone, we have a chance to do things that we're proud of and to do it for people that care. And we hope that you tell others about this mission that we're on, because as we say, we don't have customers, we have supporters. So all of us together can make a huge difference. And it's what makes the wine world go around, these small limited production wineries. So whatever you can do to encourage friends to buy, skip the store, skip the retail hassle and nightmare, help the limited production producers, grab some wine off the Cellar Angels website or the wineries themselves, and you will be better off for it. Can't thank you enough, Lise and Sean, for letting us spend some of your Friday night with us. And Sipsters, thank you so much for all the support. Be good to one another, stay safe, and everyone have a wonderful weekend. Cheers.
Aloha.
Mahalo.